purpose is to abstain from compulsive eating and compulsive food behaviours, and to carry the message of recovery through the 12 steps of OA to those who still suffer. At this meeting, we follow a rotating format. On the second week of the month is a recovered OA speaker who will be speaking on the topic of their choosing for 30 minutes. There will be a follow-up Q&A segment for 15 minutes where fellows are welcome to ask any questions of our speaker which are related to the topic in question. This meeting will be recorded by audio only, and you will see a recording sign at the top of your screen. The Q&A section of our meeting will also be recorded. Please post only in the chat function your questions to our host, Georgina, and she will ask the questions anonymously on your behalf. Please do not do this before the Q&A segment opens. Before we share, it's time to talk about our seventh tradition. Although we meet electronically, we still have Zoom meeting costs to pay. We also give contributions to OA UK EB, which is our virtual intergroup. Please make a contribution using the PayPal or bank details that will be entered in the chat now. For the last week, currently we are have agreed at Group Conscience to read the OA annual appeal letter at this time as well. This is for anybody who wishes to either make a direct donation to World Service instead of their regular donation, or may wish to make a separate payment. I will quickly read through this document. I will then share it in the chat, and I will share a link to make an online contribution. So the annual appeal letter from your World Service Office. To groups and members of Overeaters Anonymous, your contribution continues to make a difference for Overeaters Anonymous. Thank you. Here are some of the wonderful new ways we've been able to put your contributions to work. Have you accessed online literature such as To the Young Person pamphlet or one of the OA books? We've even made the Where Do I Start pamphlet available as a free download. We are currently creating a new public service announcement that will be fun and fresh. In addition, we were able to replace several staff computers. Your additional contributions help us increase our outreach. Right now, we are most limited to English-speaking countries. As a global fellowship, our desire is to continue our growth to be a presence in all countries. This takes ongoing funds to get the word out through electronic and social media. In addition, your contributions are used to fulfill our primary purpose of reaching the still suffering compulsive eater through increased availability of our literature in languages other than English, as well as through the revitalised public awareness presence. We thank you for all that you are doing for OA. We've had a couple of years where we were able to work on these goals because of your generous contributions, but we need to keep the momentum going to fulfill our primary purpose worldwide. We anticipate that in 2023, we will continue to need your support in order to grow the fellowship. We want to increase our reach to our fellows who've not yet heard of us. To be fully self-supporting, all of us need to help our organisation continue to get the word out to those who struggle with compulsive eating as we do. Here are the ways you can show your support. In addition to your regular Seventh Tradition contribution, you can donate directly to the link which is in this document, and I will post in the chat. Please remember to include your meeting number. You can also cut out of the form below and mail your cheque to World Service Office, or you can contributing automatically through the automatic reoccurring contributions link. Any amount will be appreciated, and if you cannot contribute now, we know that you continue to support OA in many different ways. In loving service and gratitude, your Board of Trustees, Treasurer. And so that's the document that we said we would read, and we'll read it for one more week. And so now we have come to the point in the meeting where a fellow with experience, strength and hope hopefully has come along to share with us. Is there anybody here who's come to share experience, strength and hope? Hey, Deb. Lovely.
Hi there.
Hi, and Jax has agreed to be our timekeeper, so let us know what you would like.
Okay, thank you.
How would you like your time, Deb?
So it's about 20 minutes or more.
Okay.
If you can give me maybe every 5 minutes, please.
Did you say every 5 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder if I got copy, or is it just,
Sorry, you broke up there, Deb. I didn't
okay,
hear
hold
you.
on, I'm just gonna switch. Yeah, I'm just gonna switch off Wi-Fi. That's what I was asking about, if it was coming through smoothly or not. All right, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so hi, my name is Deb. I'm a compulsive overeater. Thank you so much for having me share. Tonight, this kind of came about when I was asking about how to get a token. Yeah, I moved to Israel about 2.5 years ago, and I still haven't figured out the best way to get tokens to me. So I managed to get my token because a friend of mine visited a few weeks ago. And so, yes, anyhow, I will start. So I came to OA in September 2000. I was 26 years old, going on 27, and I felt completely desperate. I couldn't stop binging. You know, the binges had become daily. And I just felt like I was going crazy. And I had sat down and I opened the phone book and I copied down as many psychologist phone numbers as I could. I had 3 pages worth. And on my lunch hour at work, I sat and I called to desperately try to find someone who could help me stop binging. And I went to someone, and I think it just wasn't the right fit for me. I think I needed to find OA first, because since then I've had good experiences with therapists and they've really helped me out. But as a first experience in trying to find help, I just felt like she couldn't relate to me. And so after a few sessions, I felt just as desperate as before. And then my husband was the one who actually found um, I guess it was a contact number. It wasn't even, maybe there was a website at that point. I don't remember now. But I got a phone number to call to find out about meetings for OA. And I went to my first meeting, and it was like coming home. It was a small meeting. There were only, I think, 4 other women there. And I was the only one talking about food. And I couldn't quite understand why nobody else was talking about food, but I was just so relieved that I could speak about what I was doing to food that was such a secret for so many years, doing with food, sorry. And they all nodded and understood. And I should back up a second, because going into that meeting, I thought I was going to get turned away. I didn't, although I've been slightly heavier than I am now. I was mostly around this weight the whole time. I don't have a story of like this huge weight loss. And I thought because it was called, Overeaters Anonymous, I thought they would just tell me I didn't belong and I couldn't be a part of it. And they did the exact opposite. They made me feel accepted. They made me feel included. And I'm grateful they had the big book there at that first meeting. And so I've never left. I started that meeting and I've lived in, wow, 1, 2, 3, hold on. I think this is the 4th move I've had in those 23 plus years. And I've had OA. This is the first move actually where the move wasn't contingent on having a meeting in my city. That was always one of the parameters, moving somewhere new. I was like, I have to live somewhere where there's an OA meeting within like a reasonable distance. And this one, once, I moved at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was enough on Zoom and phone meetings that I felt like I could still continue a program even if I didn't have a meeting right in my city. And now hopefully I found someone who lives not far away, and we're talking about starting a meeting here. So so I went to that first meeting, just felt like that was, it was a place where I felt understood. What I hadn't felt before, I felt there. and I shared the secrets. I was always very secretive about food. Everyone just thought I was like this health and exercise nut. And no one knew. I always binged in the dark, alone, late at night. You know, I ate what I considered perfectly. I ate in a restrictive way all day. And then at night, I would just go. I knew like every creak on the stairs so that I could, as quietly as possible, you know, go up to the kitchen, back down to my room, go back to the go down. It was always like, I used to keep, I had these stacks of like food journals, and I would calculate every calorie and fat gram I ate in a day. And I'd come up to my total, and I was so proud of it. And then it was a very unrealistic total. And so the binging would start, you know,
5
then I'd
minutes.
go back to the kitchen, add something. Fine, thank you. And I'd cross off the total, and I'd go eat more, and I'd make a new total, and then I'd go eat more, and I'd cross that out and make a new total. And it was just demoralizing. And I remember throwing out all those food journals, and it was very freeing. Anyway, so my disease was all about restriction and calorie counting and constantly weighing myself and re-weighing myself. And not really binging on anything that could be considered food. They were all ingredients. I forgot to check if it's okay to mention foods here, but they were all sugar-based, and they were not considered food on their own. They were ingredients that you put into other foods. And that was another form of denial for me, thinking that like I wasn't really eating if I ate those things, but I was binging on them, even if I wasn't that crazy about them. So anyways, that's a little bit of what happened before. And then when I got to OA, I started going to meetings, and for like a long stretch, I would say, I started sponsoring very quickly. Like I remember I started in September, and that February, it was Unity Day, and I had a sponsee. I don't remember if she asked me that day or if I already had her. I remember being at Unity, like the OA Unity Day, with her. And so I'm really glad. I don't remember who encouraged, I guess it was my sponsor at the time who encouraged me to start sponsoring. I'm really grateful that I started right away and didn't get too caught up. I feel like I was still new enough to not get caught up in the, oh, I don't have enough experience, I don't have enough to share, I can't be a sponsor, you know. And yeah, and it's something that I've done consistently throughout the years. I've had different numbers of sponsors, but yeah, starting right away and always having that level of service has really been helpful to my recovery, I think. And so because I had this background of like counting everything, I couldn't really count days of abstinence. So like it would mess me up. I'd start counting and it would just be too much like the disease. And I heard a speaker share how he didn't count days, but then around the 2-year mark, he started counting, and he knew he had 2 years, and he kind of counted from there. And I thought, that's something I can do. That felt safe for me. And so I did the same thing around 2 years. I guess I remember I had some idea of when my last binge was. And it took me 1.5 years to get abstinent. My abstinence date is April 27th, 2002. And I didn't know that date for years. I just found it out a few years ago because, so what I would do is I'd just wait for April to be over, and then I'd celebrate and I'd say, okay, it's another year. And I used to think that like, it was really boastful to like, to announce that I had another abstinence birthday, until I really understood that it's not about me. It's about showing that the program works and that it's important to share our years of abstinence, I think. Oh, I forgot to say at the beginning, these are all my opinions. I have quite a few opinions around programs. So if you hear anything tonight that does not resonate with you, or you feel like is not very OA, this is my experience and my opinions on it. So yeah, so I would do that, and I started to get more comfortable with talking about, and then for a while I didn't want to say how many years of absence I had because I thought I was going to jinx something. Anyways, I got over all that, and then several years ago I was rereading some writing I had done, and it was dated, I think it was like May 10th or something. And it said, my last binge was 2 weeks ago, or I've been abstinent for 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, this is the information. Like I had no idea that I had it. And so I kind of counted back, and I always forget. I only know the date because I just looked at it before. It will not stay in my head for some reason. I can't memorize that date. But yeah, so that was kind of fun to find out. And I picked the topic of like slow and steady. I feel like this keeps coming up in conversations that I have with people in program, where it kind of comes from the slow and steady wins the race, but there's no race here and there's nothing to win here. But I feel like for me, everything has been about doing things slowly and adding it's like little tiny steps and little increments. And I think I knew myself well enough. I think part of this was fear and hiding, but somehow it sort of worked. I purposely didn't choose any sponsors that gave me like a whole list of what I had to do every day. I made sure I chose like the softest, nicest
That's 5
sponsors. I
minutes.
didn't. Okay, so that's 10 so far. Okay, good. Thank you. So, because I didn't want to do all the work, I didn't think I was going to, and I really like took to heart. I think what made me stay in those early days was that saying we have, that slogan is take what you want and leave the rest. And I know people have different opinions about that slogan. Some people say, and I can totally see how this makes sense, how saying that to an addict is the worst thing in the world because they're just not going to do anything. But somehow that worked with me, and it stuck with me. And so I just, over like the past 2 decades, I've just continuously added more and more. Like I give myself my own assignments. I have a sponsor and she, guides me and tells me what to do. But I also just continuously add things, and I feel like it just happens organically. And so for me, it's really been about this slow, steady progress. And for a long time, I didn't want to believe, I guess. I didn't want to believe that this disease was progressive. I was like, it can't be. I didn't even want to call it a disease for a long time. But that's my proof. The fact that I have to do so much more, I do like a ton more than I did in the beginning to maintain the exact same abstinence. That is my proof that it's progressive. Because if it wasn't progressive, I could just still do the bare minimum I was doing in the first like couple of years, and I'd still get to keep the same abstinence. Whereas now I just continuously add more stuff, and I see the growth that comes with it. I, fondly call them spiritual growth spurts because they feel really painful, and I don't like it. Like when I feel them coming on, and I'm in the middle of a really big one right now, it's uncomfortable and it's painful at times, but I've done this enough times now that having the experience of seeing the other side gives me the motivation to keep doing the work. So I wanted to talk a bit about step 6 and 7 too, because that was what I wanted my main focus to be. And those were 2 steps. And I don't know where this idea came from, if it's because they're just 2 little paragraphs in the big book or what it was, but I thought they were insignificant steps. And I've really come to think of them as like probably the most important, other than, of course, surrendering and having that connection with my higher power. Because I should kind of backtrack a bit. I was in a step study in my first couple of years of program, and I loved having a step study to be with it. And then I just couldn't keep it up. Once I had my first child, I felt like I couldn't commit to being at the exact same meeting at the exact same time every week. So I'd go to different meetings. I would make sure I got to meetings, but and at that point I was only going to 1 meeting a week. I was still early on. And so I ended up leaving that step study. And then for quite a few years, I was just looking for another one. And then shortly after moving to California, I heard about this step study that people kept talking about. And I was like, this woman kept telling me, we're almost done and it'll open up. So it opens up every round and then it closes for the duration of the step study. And then it opens up again. And I just felt like I was waiting forever for them to be done. And then I joined, and that was in March of 2011, actually. So it's been like 12 years. And something that I really like about that step study is that we have all these homework assignments that are like a practical application of the step. So what I've had to do quite a few times for steps 6 and 7 is to write out my character defects and then practice the contrary action. And so the assignment would last like a week or 2 or sometimes 3. And then I thought to myself, this is really something I should be doing every single day. Like, why am I limiting myself to practicing contrary action to, a homework assignment? And so I started including it in my 11-step morning routine. And I have a little card, like here you can see there's one side with my character defects and one side with the contrary action. And what I did this last one is from September 2022, so just over a year ago, actually a year and a half ago. And I got really specific this time. Instead of just listing my character defects, and I wrote like a little thing that
That's
makes me
15
remember
minutes.
exactly how thank you, how that character defect shows up in my life. So like for here, I have for control or being rigid, I have overpowering anxiety. For self-righteous, I have in brackets, I'm sure I did this or that. Because with my self-righteousness is a really tough one. I'll be like, I'm positive. And I think I've gotten pretty good at now. I just say, like, I just start off by telling people I'm probably wrong about this. So just let me say it, that I'm probably going to be wrong, and then, assuming I know what others think of me, and then I have in brackets, of course they think ... So those are some examples. And then on the other side, for the contrary action, I have like for control and rigidity, I have relax my body, pause, ask God what his will is for me. Or for self-righteousness, it's like pause, catch myself, humility, I don't know, acceptance, ask questions. So I have like a really specific, and I read it every morning. And it's like sending myself subliminal messages. There's something about it that's really worked nicely for me, where I read, just reading the contrary action, like reading where I want to be in those behaviors has been really helpful. And I'm trying to remember, I wrote out this whole thing this morning about step 6 and 7, and I don't want to just like read it. I want to speak it, but oh yeah, that's what I want to say. So by the time I'm at step 6 and 7, hopefully I've admitted I'm powerless, that I need this power that's greater than me, that I believe that power can help me with anything, and that I've surrendered, right? And then, so I used to think, so step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And I used to think that just means like they're all going to be gone, like it's magic, they just disappear. And I was like, so in my opinion, I'm like, that just doesn't make sense to me that they could all go, because then wouldn't I just be perfect? So the way I understand it, and the way it really resonates with me, is that hopefully after working those first 5 steps, I have enough humility to go, okay, there's stuff, there are parts of me, there are these character defects or defaults. I like using that word too, because it's really the behaviors I default to, that if I don't keep, a lid on them, they really run the show. And that's all the stuff I ate over. And so I have to be mindful of them every single day. And I need to have some, counter to them. And that's the contrary action. And before the contrary action, even, it's my connection with my higher power. Right. So to me, what it means that we're entirely ready to have them removed is that in those moments when I feel them creep up, I can find a little dose of humility and say, okay, I can't get rid of this myself. I'm going to ask my higher power to remove this character defect in this moment. It doesn't mean it's going to be gone forever. And there are some character defects that I've seen improvements over, like I still procrastinate, but I don't procrastinate as much. I'm still self-righteous, but I'm not as self-righteous as I was. So I see the progress, and this back to this like slow and steady. Like I just, I really like just like, seeing the little bits of progress. Whenever I've tried to do like a lot at once, it doesn't work. With the exception, I must say, to eliminating my binge foods. That had to be immediate and black and white and right away, but with this other stuff, with working the steps, and since I'm continuously working them, it's just this like slow. And I feel like as I work the program and as I get older too, I feel like I'm really grateful that I came into program at a young age, but I'm realizing that there's some things that I think I understand now, being in midlife as opposed to being in my mid-20s, that I couldn't understand before and that I couldn't have gone through before. So I feel like that plays a part in it too. And I just know I'm going to forget stuff I wanted to say, but hold on. There's something else. This is the newest thing I've added to my morning routine it's 12-step, but it's not OA. But there are these daily affirmations I'm reading to myself every morning. I copied them down, and there's just this one that just felt like it fit in well with this. And it says, I'm okay with taking as much time as I need to change any behaviors and replace them with healthy options that help me love and take care of myself. And that's really how I see steps 6 and 7. How much, I'm guessing I'm right around the 20-minute mark now.
Yeah, you've got 2 minutes to go for that. Well, 1 minute and 45 seconds till 20.
Okay. Can I go over? It's okay if I go over to what you brought. I think you said like 20 to 30. Okay, because I wanted to go through this thing that I found really helpful. And I didn't even talk. Okay, all right. Hold on. Sometimes I'm worried that I won't be able to talk long enough, and other times it's not enough time. So, yeah, I think I said what I wanted to about the character defects. I hope that was clear. So it's about this like continuous work that I need to do, like throughout the day, every day, to work on them. And I went to this workshop years ago. It was a step 6 workshop. And I don't really remember anything that happened in the workshop, but I got this printout. And that's all I kind of remember from it. But it was like, it's this whole checklist of, at the top, it says like, what's my character defect or core lie? And then there's a list of things that I give up by practicing that or being in that behavior, the list of payoffs, and then which spiritual principle I can apply instead. So I'll just use one as an example, like the self-righteousness. So if I'm in self-righteousness, I give up. Actually, no, I wanted to use the example of dishonesty because I think I had more stuff at the beginning here. Okay, so if I'm dishonest, okay, I give up being myself. I give up being in the moment. I give up feeling my feelings. I give up being authentic. It's a very long list. Like it's a whole page of stuff, so I won't go through all of them. I give up
So that's
self-expression.
That's 20 minutes.
That's 20. Okay. And I mean, it goes on, just to give you an idea of how this worksheet works. And then I get to be right, if that's what I'm trying to be. I get to be a victim. That's a really popular one for me. I'm working really hard on letting that go. I get to feel sorry for myself. I get to feel like I'm in control. I get to feel like I'm special. Anyways, it's clearly like these are not the things I want to feel, right? But it really highlights well, I feel like what happens when I'm in the character defects and how it really doesn't serve me. And what serves me is to rise up to the spiritual level. And that's when I'm connecting with my higher power, asking for the guidance and practicing the contrary action. So just in keeping with this theme of like slow and steady, there were a lot of things so I told you guys it took me 1.5 years to be abstinent. And within that year and a half, I had periods of abstinence, you know, but they weren't like, they were very short-lived. So I didn't consider myself really abstinent until that year and a half. And whenever people share with me, like they'll say like, oh, I relapsed. I'm like, well, how long were you abstinent? You know, like for me, in my opinion, relapse only happens after quite a long period of abstinence. And then if somebody relapses, it's a relapse, but not after like a week of abstinence or a month of abstinence. That's not how I see it. So it took me, I feel like it took me 13 years to fully surrender. And so again, it doesn't mean I wasn't surrendering during those first 13 years. I had different levels of surrender, but I remember having a moment where I thought, so I'd surrender, and there's different ways of surrendering, right? Like I had surrendered my food, I had surrendered certain behaviors around the food. But when I realized and made the connection that if I fully surrendered, that meant I had to be okay with whatever my higher power had come my way. And I didn't really like that idea. And so it took me a while to really fully accept that. And I feel like that 13-year mark was when I just accepted, like surrendered everything. And then it took me 16 years to start meditating on a daily basis. You know, for years, it just eluded me. I was like, I don't know how to, I couldn't sit still. I didn't know how to meditate. I didn't know what to do. And again, it was like in these homework assignments of my step study that I had to meditate every day for a week, or I had to meditate twice a day for a week or 2 weeks. And then I just started, I did like a minute of meditation 5 days a week. I couldn't figure out how to work the weekends into it. And then I did 3 minutes of meditation every day, still didn't know how the weekends would fit in. And then I finally was able to build the weekends into it. And now I guess 16, how long has it been? 22, like 6 years or 7 years, I guess I've been meditating every day. And I mostly try to get like an average of 10 minutes. There's some days where lately I've been able to do more days of like 15 minutes or more. Some days it's 5 minutes, but mostly I aim for 10. And it took me, I think I calculated it was like 17 years to start writing every single day. So actually, I shouldn't say that. It's not always every single day because there's one day, but at least 6 days a week, I write. Like every morning I sit down and I journal. And that's another thing that like I'd write, and I'd write for homework and I'd write for different reasons, but for to be consistent practice. And so these are like examples of the things that like just slowly built over time. And that really, that really like form the daily practice I have today. And that have really strengthened that connection with my higher power. And I mean, I can just go on talking and talking, but I think that's most of what I wanted to say. I guess it's time for questions, right? There's going to be, I'll pass.
Thank you.
I'll
Thank you,
talk a
Deb.
little bit.
That was a great, powerful share, loads and loads of stuff in. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions. So thank you. We will now open the Q&A section of our meeting, which will also be recorded. So please post your questions only in the chat function to our host, Georgina, and she will ask your question for you on your behalf. So over to you, Georgina. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And thanks so much, Debbie, for your share. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to put to Deb? If you want to just send them in the chat. Deb, I've got a question for you to get us started. Would you mind sharing a bit about your actual daily morning practice and what you do and what your spiritual practice looks like, please? Your routine now.
Sure. So I wake up really early to make sure I have time for it, because it keeps getting longer. But so the first thing I do is I pray. So I have 3 like religious prayers that I say, and then I have 3 OA prayers, and those are the 3rd step prayer. And while I'm saying the 3rd step prayer, I hold my token. And then I have I say the 7th step prayer. And when I say the 7th step prayer, I have this little stone that my sponsor gave me at one point. I hold that in my other hand. And then I say the 11th step prayer, the St. Francis prayer. And then I move on from that to reading and this is the thing, I guess this is kind of the problem with constantly adding more. It just like keeps taking me longer and longer. But I find that when I read things over and over too many times, they just kind of I stop listening. So I need to switch it up every so often so that I still listen. So what I've done is I took the pages in the big book, like from like 84, 85 to 87, where it talks about the 11th step, like the morning part. And I wrote it out to myself as, it's like, like I surrender my will and my day. I put it all like in the first person. So I have one card like that. And then I had an updated card where I put it in more detail, but still the big book stuff. Then I have a little thing from a meditation that I found really powerful that I read. I also have this, I call it a permission slip. I've noticed in the last like 3 years or so that I have a big issue with feeling like I need permission for things. And so it's this little permission slip that I read to myself that I have the permission to say no. I have the permission to say yes to things, and I have lists of things that I can. And then I have that character defect and contrary action list that I read. I mostly only read the contrary action every morning, unless I feel like I need a reminder of the character defects. And then more recently in February, I wrote out a new card, and because I heard somebody say something in a meeting that I just loved. And she said something like, this is what she said. Like, good morning. Like, so for me, it would be, good morning, Deb. This is your higher power. I will be handling all your problems today. I will not be needing your help. And I just thought that was brilliant. And I wanted to read that every morning to remind myself of that. So I went back to the big book and I took those pages again and I wrote them out. I can read it if you guys want. I don't know. But I wrote everything out like with that theme of basically, like I have little things in here, like you are going to get anxious and overwhelmed and it's okay. But first you need to accept it. Next, you need to remember that I'm always here for you and always willing to help, but you need to move aside and make room for me to lead. And then begin your day by asking me for direction. So that's, you hear where it's from the big book, but I just like made it more personal, especially to direct your thinking. Then throughout the day, every time you feel overwhelmed, anxious, fearful, self-pitying, pause, take a deep breath and call out to me and ask me to direct you. Once you've done this, relax and take it easy. I'll get back to you exactly when you need to know the answer. No sooner, no later. Be patient. And I have things I wrote in bold. This will become more and more natural the more you practice it. I'm going to help you keep your thoughts and actions away from self-seeking, selfish, and dishonest motives, but you have to remember to ask me first. Now take a deep breath and start your day. I'll be right here with you. And then there are those affirmations that I just told you guys about that I wrote that I read also. And then that actually, all of that prayer and reading takes 10 minutes. And then I give myself 10 minutes to write. If not, I can write for like a half an hour and I don't have that time in the morning. And then I meditate for hopefully about 10 minutes. So I try to keep it to about 30 minutes. On the days where I don't have to run out to work right away, I tend to like write for longer or do a longer meditation. But that's pretty much it. And I try to do it as the first thing. Like, I get up, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, and then I do this. sometimes on the weekend, somebody comes to talk to me before I get to it. But for sure on the weekdays, it's the very first thing I do.
Oh, thank you. That was really comprehensive. Thank you. Deb, the next question is, what does your service step 12 look like? You're muted, Deb. Sorry. Oh no, you're not now. I hear you.
Okay, now it's sticking. Sorry. I had to touch it a few times and I went back and forth. So service, mostly my service is like through sponsorship. I have 7 sponsees right now that I don't all talk to every week, but I've had varying numbers of sponsees, varying amount, like frequency of talking. And then I have a service position in my sub-study meeting. I have a service position on this meeting. And that's pretty much it. The rest is just like, if I try to do my best, if anybody reaches out to me, to make sure I have time to talk to them.
Thank you. Your next questions, could you tell us please how you manage to prioritize your program practices whilst having small children?
Yes. So yeah, I've been lucky to have, like, I guess in the early years, my children, I have 5 children and they're all born after I got abstinent. So they only know me being in program and like going to meetings. So it's something that they were used to from the start, that like I had to go to a meeting. And then my 2 youngest, I remember missing, like with the 3 oldest when they were born, I missed like the first 6 weeks after they were born. I didn't take them to meetings. Well, I didn't take them to meetings at all, actually. I waited like those 6 weeks and then I went back to meetings. And then I started to see people bring babies to meetings. I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. So like my 2 youngest came with me up until like they went to kindergarten, like until they were about 5 years old. They would come to meetings with me. So it was just kind of part of their like weekly routine. You know, there were some meetings that they came to it, and it can definitely be challenging sometimes. You know, it's been really hard for me to put myself first, but I guess there's something about like meetings and my OA work that I know that if I don't put that first, like nothing else will work. And when they sometimes, you know, if one of them is like, oh, do you have to get on a meeting now? You know, I'll say like, you have no idea what, like, you don't know me before the meetings. And so, yeah, it can be hard, but I've made a priority. And as they're getting older, I have more time to put into meetings. You know, when I had like a bunch of babies, I was going to 1 meeting a week and I always had some kind of service position and I always had at least 1 sponsee, but otherwise I definitely wasn't doing this 11-step routine every morning. I didn't have that back then. You know, that's only been, I don't know how many years it's been, but my oldest just turned 11, my youngest just turned 11. So yeah, I've been out of the really young, challenging stage for a while.
Oh, great. Thank you, Deb. So then the next question is about sponsorship. Could you tell us how you sponsor and if you ask the sponsees to do certain things, or are you less prescriptive than your sponsors were with you?
Yeah, so I've changed a lot as a sponsor over the years. Actually, I feel like as I've changed, I've changed the way I sponsor. So in the beginning, I was kind of reflective of what I did with my sponsor didn't require me to call like any kind of frequency. So I usually just call when there was some crisis. And I kind of did that with my sponsees. And then about like 12, 13 years ago, I think, I was like, wait a minute, I should be making sure like I'm taking them through the steps and have a like more like structured like program with them. And so mostly what I do is I just take them through, there's one of the formats that I've used in my step study that that I really like, and I use it with my sponsees. So if they're brand new to program, I use the big book and the OA 12 and 12. And if they've already been in program and they're just changing sponsors, I use the big book and the AA 12 and 12. And then I give them homework assignments every week, but otherwise I don't require, and I have them send me their food. But otherwise I don't require them to like do a certain amount of things every day. I do emphasize though that if they do want, you know, we always say like, if you want what I have, do what I do. So I do encourage them to do the stuff that I do, but I also try to give them enough space like I was given to just like go at my own pace, you know.
This question's related. Can you tell us how long it took to go through the steps for the first time?
You know, it's very vague in my memory. I think it was incredibly fast because, well, I moved in July. Yeah, I moved like 9 or 10 months after my first meeting. And I had worked the steps like within that time frame, and within that time period, I'd had to find a sponsor. And so I think it was a matter of like a few months, but it's really vague in my memory, and I don't really have writing from that first year. So I know my first 4th step was this kind of like list of, I'm not even sure what it was. It was not like a real, but I don't know if it was out of the big book, but I don't really remember more than that. And after I got into that step study, like the next year, and then I was just working the steps regularly. So more thorough.
Thank you. The next question is, you spoke about definite abstinence, no grey areas. Could you say how you define this, and if you differentiate between this and any food or food behaviours that crop up in the event?
Yeah, so I was guided really early on to make my food plan separate from my abstinence, which was really helpful for me because my food plan has changed several times over the years through pregnancy and like having little kids and some medical issues I've had. But my abstinence has always stayed the same. So my abstinence is not binging, and refraining, I guess, you know, it's kind of, I don't even think of this as part of my abstinence definition because it goes without being said, like not touching my binge foods. But so that has never changed. I got rid of my binge foods from that point that I count my abstinence from, and haven't touched them since. But there are other things that, like, you know, I've let go of over the years that I was still eating in the beginning. And so I thought that I was like cheating, or I was giving myself some pass if I made my abstinence just not binging. And then I spoke to, they were the women who were in that step study with me, who all had like 10 or 15 years of abstinence at that point. And they were like, you know, they basically told me I was being too hard on myself and too strict with that. And they're like, were you able to stop binging on your own? I'm like, no. So they were like, well, you couldn't do that by yourself. And then that kind of let me like take a breath and go like, okay, that's a hard enough challenge, just not binging, like given the way I was binging, to go from that to not binge anymore. And to feel completely neutral about food. Like I really don't think about food to the point sometimes where I forget to eat. That to me was enough of a definition. So yeah, my food plans changed a lot. Other than the binge foods that are out of the question. And that's where, you know, the character defect of black and white thinking is super useful and helpful, and where I'm grateful to have it. Like I don't find myself going, oh, I wonder if I should try eating this food or that food, you know, or I wonder if this new version of a food I used to eat would be good. I'm like, I look at it like it's poison. I have no interest in touching it. It does not spark any curiosity for me.
Thank you, Deb. What does your relationship with your higher power look like nowadays?
Yeah, it's so when I chose my higher power, I just kind of by default took, you know, the religious God that I already believed in. And I didn't have a problem with it until I reached a point where I realized that it wasn't big enough. Like my higher power wasn't really able to cover everything anymore. And so I kind of struggled with changing my definition because I thought it was like kind of blasphemous, or because it was like a religious God, you know, that I was basing it on. I was like, I can't change anything about the definition. But then I heard enough people speak about doing that, and I realized that like my recovery depended on me having a higher power that I could depend on for everything, and that had to be big enough for everything. And so when I widened that scope, it really helped me. And I rely on my higher power constantly. Like I'll say like, you know, please come with me. Like I'll have like little visuals where I'm like, you know, let me put you in my pocket, hold my hand, hold both my hands, like depending on, you know, and there's some days where I forget to keep asking for that. I say it in the morning and then I don't say it again. There are other days where I say it repeatedly, but my first thought is always if I have a question about something, I ask my higher power for direction. It's like an automatic response.
Thank you, Deb. That's all the questions that's all the questions, unless anyone's got a final one. I'll hand back to you then, Linda. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgina, and thanks again, Deb, for what you shared. So Q&A time has now come to a close. We will now open the chat to share our numbers for outreach. For those who would like to, please share your name and number. Please could all available absent sponsors indicate if you are available to sponsor. For any newcomers, we have a newcomer hub where our newcomer greeter, Cara, I'm not sure if Claire's on now, she was earlier, will be available to answer questions for you. If you would like to stay behind at the end of the meeting and ask questions, please raise your hand electronically now, and we will invite you to a breakout room on Zoom at the end of this meeting. We will now close the meeting the same way we always do, with a new Freedom Big Book study, by reading the 12 Promises of Recovery as laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're at the bottom of page 83, starting with the paragraph, if we are painstaking, and ending, if we work for them. Deb, would you be kind enough to read the promises for us this evening? And you are on mute. I don't know if you... They're shared on the screen, Deb.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I was getting my book. Let me just make it a little bigger. Okay, the promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Our meetings are reoccurring on a weekly basis. Our next meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday at the same time as 7:30. May your higher power bless you and keep you until then. And Georgina, if I can ask you to stop the recording here.